Hi, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Plymouth Live. I am your host and your town manager, Derek Brindisi. Before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about this format. This is a new format that we started with our communications coordinator, Casey Kennedy, who's here with us today. Hi, Casey.
Hello.
So today's format is focused on having a back and forth conversation with the community around issues that are really important to the community. And today we're going to talk with Kelly McElreath, our town clerk, on the consolidation of polling locations. Kelly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to be here.
So just for the folks that are joining us via Zoom, you certainly can type any one of your questions into the chat, and Casey will let us know that we have questions, and we'll answer those questions to the best of our ability. But just before we get into the question and answer period, Kelly, what I want the community to know is that we have been really thinking about being very creative in how we provide information back to our residents. And this format of having a live back and forth chat is one way we're doing that. Casey just did the first This Week in Plymouth on the road,
Yes.
right? So that was focused with the new body camera program with the police department. So looking at a lot of different ways to provide information. We also have a blog that Casey will be starting soon to provide information for those folks who just don't read. And then, as you all know, we started a podcast back in December where we try to provide the facts of what's going on in the community, knowing that there's a lot of misinformation, mostly on Facebook. And so we try to provide good information the best that we can. And I'm sure, Casey, you'll have a lot of other new and creative ideas on how we're going to push information back to our residents.
Yes,
so.
ever evolving. So
That's right.
Very excited.
So if folks have suggestions or ideas on how they would like us to provide information, maybe our residents consume information a little bit differently, and so we're happy to do that. As our new quarterly magazine's coming out April 1st.
April 1st, yes.
So the third edition of our quarterly magazine. So lots of different platforms. But let's get to consolidation of the polling locations,
Okay.
Ms. McElreath. So so a little bit of background. We had 14 polling locations.
Yes.
And we've had that for a number of years. And I know one of the goals of the select board that they set last summer was to ask the town clerk to look at polling location as a whole and come back with a recommendation. So I don't want to surprise anybody what you came up with, but can you give us a little bit of background on what you came up with?
Sure. So as most people are now aware, we have a lot of early voting, vote by mail and in-person early voting. So we looked at all the data that we had from the 5 elections that we had in 2024. We had over almost 85,000 votes that were cast in 2024 in the 5 elections. And that include anything from the NIP ban to the presidential primary, to the local election, to the state primary, to the state election. So we were able to calculate that 53% of those 8,500 ballots were cast early, meaning voters either submitted their ballots by mail or they came into town hall during the early voting period and voted early. So that proved to us that we had less than 50% of our voters were going to their polling location on election day. And it can be it can be strenuous on town resources to open up 14 polling locations. It's strenuous for the police because we have to have a police officer at each one of those locations according to Mass General Law. It's stressful for the schools because they're closed,
Right.
but they have professional development day. So again, the select board asked me to take a look. So we looked at the numbers, and we were able to recommend to the select board that we felt comfortable, we're confident that we can consolidate locations to either 4 or 5 locations versus the 14 locations. The select board review it February 4th, I believe was the date, and then on February 11th, they voted to consolidate to 5 different locations instead of the 14 locations in Plymouth.
Now, after you presented this the first time, and like you said, you had given the select board 2 different options. You can go to 4 locations, or if you want, you can also consider 5 locations. But that was a good way of really being efficient with town staff, both, like you said, on the town side and the school side. But this really wasn't about finances, because I know some of the folks that were against the consolidation of polling locations would say things like, it's not worth $6,000, right? So what are the finances? Because I don't think it's a major savings, but that wasn't the driving factor behind this, correct?
Correct. It's always good to save money, the taxpayers' money.
Right.
But at the same time, $6,000 might not seem a lot, and we're only having one election in 2025. But if you go out in the next 5 years and we have 10 elections, that's $60,000. So it will add up, and I believe those savings will be even more. But it's mostly for the efficiency of elections. It's easy. I kind of say it's easier for us, but that's not what I mean. It's easier for the voters to get, if there's an issue on election day at one of the polling locations, we will have the resources there in order to resolve those issues more quickly. Like if they're inactive or there's a question on their voter registration, we'll have the staff and the resources there to do it versus going into, for example, South High, and there's one warden and 5 election clerks, and they have a question, and unfortunately the warden might not be familiar with that unique situation, so they'd have to call me. Or we had a piece of equipment that broke down, and I happen to be in West Plymouth, and all of a sudden I'm in the car and I'm trying to get to South High to correct the equipment that's not working. So it takes our resources and combines them so we can better service the voters on election day.
So it's more, what I'm hearing what you're saying is that this is about efficiency of government.
Correct.
And increasing the level of service that we're able to provide to our residents and taxpayers.
Correct.
That's
exactly.
fair to say.
Yep.
Casey, do we have anybody who's interested in asking a question?
Not as of right now. But
Okay.
I think this is great information.
Good. So we'll just keep on. So we're talking about efficiencies of government. It saves, like you said, about $6,000 per election. So last year we had 5 elections. This would have saved $30,000. And the interesting thing about the saving of dollars, again, going back to there were folks that were saying it's not worth it. But we are tasked, and I say we as the administration, are tasked by the select board, by the finance committee, ultimately by town meeting, to look at places to cut costs.
Correct.
Every single year we're asked to cut costs, wherever those costs may be. Sometimes maybe because of technology, we've been able to cut costs because maybe we don't need as many staff. And so it's interesting that folks would say in this situation, well, we don't want you to cut costs. We want to keep things the same way. But, I credit to you for doing that. But you've instituted a lot of other new technology. You've been in this position about 3 years here in town.
Correct.
Can you talk about some of the other technology that you've been able to institute, like the polling pads?
Yes. So when I first came to town, thank you for the support of town meeting. Actually, at that point, it was the Advisory and Finance Committee. In the past, when you came in, you checked, our voter checked in, especially on election day, it was a piece of paper, and they turned the pages and they checked your name off on a piece of paper. And in order to capture the voter history, the staff in my office would then need to go back and scan barcodes of every voter that came in. So, for example, in November of 2024, we had 40,000 voters at that election. Can you imagine staff scanning 40,000 barcodes for that voter history? Now, because town meeting and A&F supported the purchase of these poll pads, which are iPads, they're very secure. They get upgraded and updated every couple of years, and we load the voter list onto there. So we check them on the voter. So we check the voter off on the poll pad, on the iPad, and within 2 hours we are able to take those. Well, in particular on election day when it was about 17,000 people on November 24th, we were able to take those voters, put it in a file, put it into the state system, and I can honestly tell you, those voters were uploaded in less than 2 hours. And we did not have to do the scanning of 40,000 or 17,000.
And again, largest town in the Commonwealth.
Correct.
Big community, so we have to look at ways of being more efficient by using technology.
Right, and on that note, in-person early voting. I know I gave the stat of 53% voted early, but what I was very interested in on Halloween, October 31st, I remember running into you in the hallway. That the state has sent out stats of what all the communities
That's
were
right.
doing, 351 cities and towns across Massachusetts. And they sent out the stats of how many ballots were mailed, how many ballots were received by mail or in person early, so on and so forth. I was able to take those stats and sort it by the number of ballots that we had on hand. We had in Plymouth on October 31st, we had 20,300 ballots that had been voted that were in the town clerk's office, safe and secured, being counted and processed 6 days before the election, okay? There were only 4 communities above us: Boston, Worcester, Cambridge, Newton, Plymouth. So again, I know Plymouth, and I believe it's got a great small-time feel, but we have a large voting population in the
Right.
town, and we need to move forward to help us make elections more efficient, because we are on level with Boston, Worcester, Cambridge, and Newton.
Well, and speaking of that high volume, you were also able to institute some high efficiency scanner. What was that?
Correct. So Mass General Law allows us, with knowing that a lot of voters would take advantage of voting early, either by mail or in person. They instituted regulations that allow us that once the ballot is received and in the envelope and checked in and registered, then we have, starting like 7 days before the election, we bring in election workers and they open those envelopes, they check them off on the iPad, they check them off on a piece of paper, they separate the envelope from the ballot, and then we take those ballots, we seal them up, and then the next day they go through what we consider to be a high-speed tabulator.
Okay.
So if you're used to voting on election day and it goes to the tabulator and it goes click, 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 and it takes a couple seconds for one ballot to go through, we can process 50 ballots in less than a minute. And when you have 20,300 ballots, you need to be able to process 50 ballots.
And so the point of that story is that we have, like you said, we have a high voting population.
Correct.
Right? We need to look at ways to be more efficient to service this population, right?
Correct.
So whether it's the poll pads or whether it's the tabulator, consolidation is just kind of along that same trajectory of being more efficient, right?
Correct.
And how we provide this level of service. So getting back to the consolidation of polling locations, the board had originally voted for the 4.
Correct.
I guess we'll call it option A, right? And you had provided an option B, which was 5 locations. The board then came back a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks later. Certainly we all heard, I'm sure your office did, calls of folks saying that there was like this, I'm going to make my own words, like this desert,
Correct.
voting desert or voting location down in South Plymouth. And they came back a couple weeks later and then re-voted for the 5th location. Can you describe those 5 locations?
Sure. So we took North Plymouth and we consolidated them into PCIS. Before I actually explain, we are now voting at elementary and middle schools and no longer the high schools, because again, we want less stress on the schools, and there's a lot of high school students that do sports and after school activities that we could interfere with. So we agreed with the school that we would now vote at the 2 middle schools. So the first location is PCIS, Plymouth Intermediate Community School, located on Long Pond Road. And we consolidated Precinct 1 that vote at Hedges, Precinct 2 that votes at Cold Spring, Precinct 3 that votes at the school administration, Precinct 4 that votes at North High currently, Precinct 10 that votes at Federal Furnace, and Precinct 18 that was currently voting at PCIS. Those 6 precincts will be located at PCIS. So if you voted in any of those locations that I just mentioned, for the election on May 17th, you'll be going to PCIS.
So if I could just jump in here. So someone back at home may say, 6 precincts at one location, how dare you? But this has been tried and true across the Commonwealth and probably the US, right?
Correct.
6 precincts in one location isn't that big of a lift, correct?
No. We actually had somebody come out from the state to look at the schools that we were looking for ADA access and making sure that she agreed with what we were thinking. And she wholeheartedly said that having 6 precincts at PCIS was very doable and very comfortable with it. I think there's almost 300 parking spots. Now, granted, voters, depending on when you show up if you show up on election day and what time you show up. You might have a little bit of a walk to get to the door. But other than that, there will be a parking space for you and to be able to walk in and vote. And the lines are not going to be, you're not thinking of, the lines are not 6 precincts all in one line and you get distributed. We will have, it's still the precinct. So just like if you walked into Federal Furnace for Precinct 10, you walked in there, well, at that point, that's not a great example because they had 2 precincts there. You went to 10. And you're going to do it the same way. So let's use Precinct 3, which is school administration. You walked in, you were the only one there, you walked into the check-in and you went. Now what will happen is you'll walk in, you'll see a beautiful sign, hopefully, that says Precinct 3, and your same election workers that you saw at the school administration are more than likely going to be sitting at that table. And they will check you in, and then you go to the voting booths, you vote the ballot, and then you put your ballot in the Precinct 3 tabulator, and you leave.
Well, yeah, and the other, while you're talking, I'm thinking about how some of the calls for concern we receive are, there's no way you can handle the traffic, the parking, and I'm thinking, first of all, these are at schools.
Correct.
And has anyone gone to a school in the morning for when the parents drop off their kids? I mean, if the schools can handle student drop-off in the morning and student pickup in the afternoon, they certainly will be able to handle a voting day. How long is it, 8-9 hours of voting?
Actually, it's 13. It's
13
7
hours.
a.m. to, no, 11, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
So if you spread that voting population, which as you pointed out is less than 50% of all of our registered voters, and you spread that out over a 13-hour period, I don't think we expect a high volume all coming in at once.
Correct. Correct. And I will just, before I go on to the other locations, another reason why, one, the select board wanted us to look at this consolidation, but this was a really good time to do it because for the next, I'm not anticipating having 5 elections in 2025 like we did in 24, and they're smaller elections. We have the local election in 25, local in May of 26, the state primary in September of 26, and then of course the state election, which the governors would be on the ballot in November of 26. So that gives us at least three elections to look what's working, what's not working, what can we do better,
Right.
and make those corrections before we will see a 50% turnout.
And so that's a good point because that was another concern that we were doing this swiftly and it's going to affect the local election in May. But to your point, there probably wasn't going to be an ideal time.
No.
This is probably the best of all the scenarios, given what you just outlined. Let's put this into action. Let's work out the kinks for 2 or 3 elections before the big governor's race in 2026.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So back to the other 4 polling locations.
So then the next location would be West Elementary. Currently, Precinct 13 votes there. So we'll be bringing Precinct 11 that voted at Federal Furnace and Precinct 5 that voted at Town Hall will be voting at West Elementary. So we will no longer have a polling location at Town Hall moving forward.
Okay.
So
But if you're an early voter,
you
that's
vote
where you
at
go.
Town Hall,
Right.
yes. And the town manager is a very big proponent
I love
of
early voting.
in-person
I
early
walk
voting.
downstairs and cast my vote.
Yeah. So that's West Elementary. Then we go to Indian Brook Elementary. That currently houses Precinct 7 and 14. So, of course, you will stay there. And Precinct 6, which is in Manamet Elementary, will move to Indian Brook.
Okay.
And then we have South Elementary, which currently votes Precinct 9 and 17. And they will be joined by Precinct 8, which is Cedarville, will be going to South Elementary. And lastly, we had South Middle has 2 polling locations currently, Precinct 12 and 16. And the unique situation is Precinct 15 actually voted at South High. So the South High Precinct 15 will be moving to South Middle. So as much as it's a polling location change, you're just taking a different driveway to get to the polling location. And we were able to calculate that 48, if you subtracted Precinct 15, because as much as that's a change, but it's not a major change, 48% of the voters had their location changed in the town. So more than 50 kept their same location.
And for those folks, so I know that, and we'll talk about your election coordinator in a minute, but I know that your election coordinator did a a distance analysis, I guess you could
Correct.
call it.
Yep.
And I think what he found was that, most voters didn't have to travel more than 10 minutes
Correct.
to the voting location?
Correct. And I think he took the furthest person, and that person was gonna, voter, I was gonna say, and that voter was gonna have to maybe travel 20 minutes, but
Okay.
they were probably traveling 10 minutes now, so it was gonna be 10 minutes longer.
Additional time.
And again, we actually looked at that road, I think it was Buttermilk Road or that.
Down in Buttermilk Bay, yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
He looked at that, and it was so true. Out of the voters at that on that street,
Yep.
more than 50 of them voted early. So it really coincided with what the overall town statistics were.
Well, and that's where I wanted to get to ultimately, because the folks that are against this consolidation who say, I have to drive an extra 10 minutes, some of the select board members, part of their rationale to make this decision was you don't.
No.
You just can do a vote by mail. And how does that work?
So vote by mail. So the good news. So vote by mail. You can go online. There's a link on the town clerk's website, and you can sign on. You can sign up online for us to request us to mail you a ballot. For the May election, hopefully we get them, second week in April, and we'll mail those out. Last count, we had over 400 already requests because we did put the QR code on the back of the census form, so
Yep.
that worked out pretty well. And the good news is we have to, those 48% voters that have a polling location change, by Mass General Law, we're required to send them a postcard to the household. So if there's 2 voters, it's 1 postcard. But that same QR code is on that postcard. So if anybody there says, I don't want to drive from Cedarville to South Elementary, they can click on the QR code and sign up online, and we would mail them a ballot.
And so it's easy. They
It's
request a ballot, your office mails it to them, they check off who they want
Vote
to be
for.
elected, and then they send it back.
And it's a postage paid envelope coming back, and they don't even have to pay for postage.
Wow, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So that's the vote by mail. So again, those folks who feel like they've been disenfranchised by this new movement to be more efficient, they can always contact your office to do a vote by mail. But early voting.
Early
How
voting.
does early in-person voting, how does that work?
So we have become experts at it because of especially with the 5 elections last year. So we set up pretty much a polling location right in the atrium or the glass lobby of Town Hall. And we have election workers that come in. They have the same type of poll pads that we use on election day. And you get checked in, you get your ballot, you vote it, you place it in an envelope that is signed, that you sign, and it has your information in it. And then we take that envelope and we process it through the system that a ballot has been received. So you cannot show up on election day and vote again. 1 vote per voter, and we process those ballots. Depending on how many we have, we'll either process them early, which we're allowed to do, or we'll process them on election day at the locations. That being said, because of the consolidation, for the last three local elections, we normally did Thursday to Wednesday before the election on Saturday. This time we're doing Wednesday to Wednesday. So we're going to start, I believe the first date is Wednesday, May 7th. It's town hall hours, so town hall opens at 7:30 in the morning, which is early for a town hall to open. So on your way to work, you can stop at town hall at 7:30 and vote. We're there till 4 on most days, noon on Friday. And then that will be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On Saturday, we're going to be open 9 to 2. Sunday, we won't have it on that Sunday. And then Monday, we'll be there again, 7:30 to 4. Tuesday is the big day because we're there till 6:30 at night.
This is for the May election?
For the May election.
What was the date on the May election again?
May 17th.
May 17th. So again, I know you always remind me at my town manager reports on Tuesday nights to talk about when we can do early in-person voting, how folks can go ahead and ask or request a mail-in ballot. So we'll continue to provide that information over the next 2 months.
It's actually on the Select Board's agenda for March 18th to approve the hours because we do need a Select Board vote. So in anticipation of that vote, it's already on our website on what those hours are that I just stated. So it's there.
Okay, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Just because we've known each other for so long.
I'm nervous now.
So, I love early in-person voting.
Yeah.
And I know we probably don't need to do it anytime soon. But is there an outside chance for a big election, maybe the next presidential election, we would do a second early in-person voting, maybe for our friends in South Plymouth?
We could. We
Okay.
could definitely.
I told you I'd put you on the spot.
I know. We could definitely discuss it. I don't think we need it for the local elections.
No, agreed. I agree.
But I will counter that since we know each other so well. The presidential election that we had in November, we had 7,600 people come during those 14 days of early voting to Town Hall and voted. I believe that last Friday we had almost 600 people come in from 7:30 to noon.
I remember that stat,
Okay,
yeah.
so I counted that a little bit because 7,600 people is historically what we get for local elections. So I kind of look at it, if 7,600 people could make their way to Town Hall over
Right.
14 days, they can make their way to Town Hall for the big elections because we'll be open longer weeks and more hours. So I'm not totally
So
against
more
it.
to come. We got
more
years
to
to
come.
plan
More
that
to come.
one.
We can definitely talk about that as we go on.
Okay, so that's a lot on consolidation and why you made the recommendation. And again, I know a lot of folks were saying, well, why did the town clerk do this? Let's be clear. This was one of the many goals of the select board to at least do this analysis. And we collectively, under the select board's leadership, have been, trying to find ways to, create efficiencies in government. So we'll continue to do that. One other way that you created some efficiencies, and I think it really helped streamline the 5 elections, is advocating, without any real additional dollars, is bringing in an election quarter in the town clerk's office. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So because we're now on par, we have the voters like the big cities or the other cities in Massachusetts. It was difficult. I was finding the role, not difficult, but it was a lot of pressure on me to make sure I was there to coordinate the testing of the ballots and scheduling election workers and every minute detail that goes into elections. Because elections are no longer just one day. They have 45 days of planning and executing and making sure everything is correct to get to election day. So I think you and I had talked about it. I had an opening in my office. So,
That's right.
so for a little bit of an increase in salary, we were able to hire an election coordinator. His name's Tyler Hazard. He's been great for the
Home run.
office.
Home run
Home
hire,
He has
yeah.
been very, very good. He comes from actually the advocate side, like the voter advocate side. So he challenges me on why we're doing things a certain way
Good to know.
because he always is looking out for the voter and what's best for the voter. So it's worked out really well. He's really taken the role. And this consolidation, I don't know if we would have had the analysis if it wasn't for him. So I thank the taxpayers in town meeting for approving those monies to bring an election coordinator in.
But that's, again, efficiency. You just pointed out, we had a vacancy within your department, right? And you said, instead of let's doing the same thing over and over and expect this different results,
Yeah.
we took existing dollars and, like you said, with a minor increase, we're able to transform that position into the town's first ever election coordinator. And that, in my mind, I mean, you hired Tyler at the right time because we had 5 elections last year. So
Correct.
you certainly needed the help. But, just his experience, as you pointed out, he's been a great hire for the town. And I believe a lot of other large municipalities across the Commonwealth are going to look at this model as something that they should emulate.
Correct. As a matter of fact, as you know, I'm very heavily involved in the Mass Town Clerks Association. So there were a lot of requests for job descriptions for election coordinators out there that I
Really?
kept sharing the job description we created here in Plymouth for that purpose. Because elections, people used to look at town clerks as the clerks that issued dog licenses and you saw on election day. We have a lot more responsibility based on what has
Yeah,
happened over
absolutely.
the last 20 years, as you personally became aware of. So you need the additional help and the professional staff in order to help us, accomplish all the tasks that we're assigned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Casey, I know we're running out of time. Any calls? Any questions? Nothing.
That was a fast
Okay.
30 minutes.
Well, it does go by
by.
fast. We have a lot to talk about. So, Kelly, we only have a few seconds, but just remind everybody, when is the local election in May?
The local election is Saturday, May 17th. Polls open at 7 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m. And definitely, there's a link on the website that you type in your address, and it will tell you what location you need to go to with the consolidations. That website also has the link for the vote by mail application. And lastly, it has the hours for voting in person early at Town Hall, beginning, I believe, May 7th.
Perfect. That's a lot of information. So, Kelly, thank you for coming. Casey,
Thank you.
thanks you for providing some tech support. And thank you all for joining This Week in Plymouth Live, although we didn't have anybody who dialed in. We'll continue to offer these types of episodes where you can ask your question or maybe provide some important feedback that we can take back to Town Hall and make some improvements. So until next time, thank you again. Go to the website at plymouth-ma.gov, and you'll get all the information that Kelly just provided. Thank you very much.